Chad, we got Geoff Bullock. I mean, if there is any song in the history of all the songs that I can remember leading as a young worship leader in the early 90s, which had a profound impact on me and just the experience of leading it, was The Power of Your Love. For sure. You were just mentioning that song to
Yeah,
me. I
you
mean,
stole
so
that. That was gonna
incredible.
be what I was just gonna say was my
Nah.
favorite song of Jeff's from the '90s, and I
Yep.
guess you and I are,
Well,
we're in
that's why.
sync
What you
today,
know? What
Ryan.
when the show starts, you just got to jump to the punch, and whoever gets there first gets to say the best thing. So that is the thing about us. But beyond that, I continue to be fascinated by people who played such a significant part in the journey
Yeah.
all over the world, like from the deep south of the United States to across the oceans. And here we are, we're going to talk to a guy from Australia. And I can still remember exactly where I was when the first time I heard some local worship pastor tell me that their church has been like swooned by this music coming from Australia. And I was like,
Yep.
Australia? Like, why
Oh
Australia?
boy.
What's going on there? So,
Yeah,
I mean, here
upside
we are
down,
now
upside
25
down
years
music from
later,
down under.
and so anyways, it's going to be a fascinating conversation. Geoff is standing by. Let's go. This is going to be a fun one. Here we go. Geoff Bullock, looking so good.
Yes, in my Nashville T-shirt of all things.
Yes, I love it. Well, it's 2:30 in the afternoon where I am. It's probably early in the morning where you are, but we're so glad to have you on this show and to reminisce with us a little bit. Certainly, as you have heard us both just chatting already, we are huge fans of you and see and acknowledge the mark that you made on a worldwide basis, probably even beyond what you're even aware of how many people, how many revivals, how many worship services have sung your songs. And not even just your songs, but it's the trail of impact that has gone out. It's like if you're a reservoir and there's rivers that are flowing out from the impact that you have had over the years. So I see that PraiseCharts is living out that legacy, and we just want to honor you a little bit, even in this show, to tell you what an impact you've had.
Oh wow! I mean, really, it's it is an odd feeling for me because I was there at the birth of the songs,
Yeah,
and I think the church that I was part of, which was called Hills Christian Life Centre, and it became Hillsong, which is a little name I made up for the music team back in 1984
yeah,
or 85, and we had no idea. We were just running services, and I've been a musician all my life, but all of a sudden, I'm finding I'm writing songs that can be sung, and it was just basically to have worship for our congregation and bring the presence of God and an awareness of God and change in people's lives. But they left home. They took
yes,
off.
yes,
You
they
know,
did.
this is I mean, these upside down songs from down under. I mean, goodness me,
Yeah, it's
that was
Geoff.
a
I
good
gotta
breakup
say,
side
just to
then.
interject a little bit, but it's always so amazing to me to hear a story from someone who were like, you're not expecting it, you didn't try for it, you weren't trying to write
No,
world class hits, you were trying to write songs for your local church. Even the
Yeah.
word Hillsong, you didn't make that as a brand for a worldwide music publishing
no,
company. It was like a little thing for your local. These are the songs that we're singing, and I just think that is so awesome. It's so authentic, it's so grassroots and so real. It's almost the way it should be. So, and Chad, I just want to ask you, because before we started recording this, you started into a conversation telling Geoff about an impact that you're aware of. Why don't you go back to that story? And I just want to hear Jeff's response to that really quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, definitely, Jeff. I mean, one of the main songs people equate your name to
Yeah.
with '90s worship is "I Will Never Be," You know,
Right.
and I will
Wow.
say, first off, my personal experience, I mean, I remember, very vividly, I was on the church platform as a teenager, the, small church in southern Indiana that I grew up in. And I remember when we first got the, Shout to the Lord album from Integrity Music, because we had, we were on the mailing list. So we, every new album, we got the songbook and the CD.
Mm.
And I had never heard of Hillsong prior to that. Uh, and we immediately started listening to the song and just really fell in love with that whole album. Yeah, as we were mentioning earlier, I mean, "The Power of Your Love" is probably my favorite song of yours, but I was really captivated by "I Will Never Be," and I think myself, along with everyone else in America who was in church during that time with modern worship, just fell in love with both of those songs. But specifically, what's been fun, for me, founding 90s Worship Night and producing this docu-series that we've been working on the last 4 years is just having a conversation with several people who were integral to the 90s worship narrative, and learning stories about these songs and the movements. And what's really amazing about that little song that you wrote all back then, um, it became the theme song for this movement called the Smithton Outpouring, which was a big revival in Smithton, Missouri, from 1996, through the end of the decade. And Jeff, they sang "I Will Never Be" for altar service every single service. They had over during the course of that 3 to 4 year period, over 300,000 guests come through that little church,
Hmm.
and just
Wow.
amazing testimonies and miracles. And that all culminated in they actually recorded a live album there with Integrity Music, back the whole Hosanna Music, label
Mm.
where they went different places, recorded live album. But, um, Don Moen guest appeared there, and, Lincoln Brewster was there, and Eric Newsom is a good friend of mine. He was the worship leader for the Smith and Outpouring, but they recorded a version of "I Will Never Be," that was on that album as well. So, yeah, I think that's just a perfect illustration of what Ryan and I were talking about, how, when these songs back in that time period, they kind of got out there, unintentionally in many cases, and had a worldwide impact. So I just wanted to share
Incredible.
that story.
Yeah.
Well, and thank you. It's an extraordinary story because I clearly remember writing that song, and it came in a real rush.
Huh.
Um, and that is the I have I had no idea that song has had an impact. No idea whatsoever. And to hear uh, the story of that and how it's been used is, and it's a funny thing. As I said before, that it's like having famous children that don't send you postcards. That I,
Yes.
and here's one of the naughty little things, you know, that song's gone off and had a whole famous time and hasn't even, well, he probably sent me a royalty, but
Yeah.
but
Yeah, that
and
showed up in the
look,
mailbox. Yeah.
well, I'm always cracking jokes. The thought is that when I was sitting in a service in Brisbane at the AOG National Conference of 1995, and the guest speaker at the time was an evangelist called Rodney Howard Brown. And in those days, there was a whole lot of phenomena that was going on at the time, a lot of laughing and everything. And it was one of those many things that we've seen go through the church. Um, and I think he was doing an offering. And he was just running around saying, "I will never be the same again. I will never be the same again." And
Really.
it went on for quite a while. And I'm thinking, that's I will never be this. That's got a nice rhythm to it. And so I'm sitting there, and people think I'm taking sermon notes. I'm writing a song, and for the beginning of the evening meeting, uh, I wrote it in 5 minutes, taught it to the band, taught it to Darlene, and that's how the song was born. It
Really.
was that simple, and and so often, and I'm sure you've spoken to many songwriters where there just comes a moment where you sort of kind of feel you're doing dictation, but you don't want to presume you're doing dictation. But at the same time, there's this sort of synergy with God and your piano, and everything. Where something is born most unexpectedly. The power of your love was exactly the same. It just arrived.
I mean, and both of those songs, they're not three chord songs. It's not like,
Oh,
like I was just playing through I Will Never Be the Same Again, remembering all the times that I've led that song. But it has some rich chord progressions. That's something that actually I would say you distinctively helped bring to this modern worship era. Is you brought a level of musicianship to, like, I mean, I don't know all of the songs that you had a part of, but just thinking back,
Well,
maybe you could help.
they're all on your website.
I know, I know. I could look for them, but I'm just thinking about the musical richness of these songs, like "I Will Never Be the Same," and "Let the Peace of God Reign." That was the other one that I wasn't sure if you had written that, but certainly it's in the genre of music that you were kind
Yeah.
of setting up, where it's like, how did you come up with this? This is like a new sound for the church.
Well, see, it's very lovely what you're saying, but it's all news to me. Here am I in
Yeah,
Australia, and I feel like I'm being lathered, with
yeah,
compliments. And thank you very much. You've made my day. But look, I I've always been musical, and
yeah.
I've played lots of instruments, and uh, but uh, but when I became a Christian, the urge to be a musician and the urge to be uh, a songwriter all left, and I had uh, an abiding and growing love for Jesus, where I discovered that I had an ability to sit behind a piano and sing. And
Hmm.
then write songs, and they resonated with people. So it was sort of like, well, not sort of like, very much like the prayers that I were praying that became lyrics, that became melodies, that were my prayers, somehow left my piano and my spirit and were embraced in the prayers and the lives of other people,
Hmm.
um, which is a gifting. It is how God has used them. I
Hmm.
don't even say it's a gifting of mine. It is just
Hmm.
how the Holy Spirit has used them. And the musical side, well, I've always loved chord inversions. Um, I've always had the philosophy: why have one chord in a bar when you can have 25?
Yes.
And so, and you, I suppose, musically with my songs, yes, you hear lots of inversions and uh, runs,
Yes.
but that's just how I play. That's my busy style of playing piano.
Yeah.
And by the grace of God, I mean, as again, I'm hearing things that I'm quite unaware of. I've known
Yeah.
that the songs have been successful, but I haven't. Yes, I'm just grateful.
It's
I could,
that's
I could
that's
rave
so
for
awesome.
I could rave for another 25 hours, but I'll let you talk.
Okay, I got a few questions. This is just going back to the very early years. You were just saying that you came up with this name Hillsong for your little church. I just want to ask that question of, like, why did you have to name your music program, or where did this term Hillsong come from? Take me right back to that early in your worship world.
Okay, well, just a real small history of the church that became Hillsong. We were part of a mother church, a very musical mother church that was in the centre of Sydney, and they've decided to have a church meeting in different locations at night. So
Yeah.
one church went to the northern beaches, one church went to the eastern suburbs, say, and then we went out to the Hills district. And we were fortunate that we gained a lot of musicians from a charismatic movement. And we came in as a bunch of late 20-year-olds uh, being loud and noisy. And and fearless, probably, or
Yeah.
ignorant. And the style of the way we were playing the choruses of the day, we just rocked them up a little, and so people started asking us to go to rallies, and or they were interested in it. But we couldn't call ourselves the Hills Christian Life Centre Worship Band. I mean, that just doesn't really flow. And
Right.
I was floating around a swimming pool with the senior pastor at the time, Brian Houston, who was a very, very close friend of mine. And I said to Brian, why don't we call the music team Hillsong? And Brian said, why? And I said, well, it's a whole lot easier to say than the Hills Christian Life Centre Worship Band. But it basically was born from a song that I'd written, which wasn't to be, it was a song for, just a presentation song. Um, and the first lyric was, there's a song from the hills.
Huh.
And so it just came out of that song. That's it. And we were not trying. This is before we went into a warehouse. We maybe have had 150 people in the congregation. I hadn't even written a worship song yet. It was just an idea of this. Why don't we do this?
Yeah. And there it was. All right,
There it was.
some more fascinating early questions. I'm just
That's
like
amazing.
a fanboy, asking these questions. But
Yeah. Well, I've got several
Darlene,
questions too,
oh great,
Ryan.
oh
So
sorry. Well, you're gonna
there you
have to
go.
like step in, whenever you want. But after this question, so
Okay, okay.
Okay.
I'll get the
well, I
next one
just
after your next one.
okay.
There you go.
But tell me about your very first ever impression or meeting of Darlene, because she's certainly become a voice that one of the rivers that flowed out from you and maybe never sent you a postcard.
Mm.
I don't know, but tell me your first impression of this young girl.
Well, Darlene was the daughter-in-law of a couple uh, who were part of the very early days. We were still in the school hall, so this is 1985, 80, no,
Mm-hmm.
1984. And she came down with her husband Mark with a bunch of backing tracks, and she had been quite popular uh, in a Queensland television show where they gathered young people of late school age with great talents, and they did a production and they sang and danced. And so Darlene had quite a presence in Queensland, and she came down in a Laura Ashley dress. If anyone remembers Laura Ashley,
Hmm.
lots of frills,
Yeah.
and sang. And then because her in-laws were in the church, she came down. And my first impression of Darlene was just this. She's 20 years younger than I am, so she would have been in her early 20s.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, early 20s, 21, 20, 21, maybe 20. And she would have been 20 actually, 19 or 20, not that it matters. And she just had an openness, that she
Huh.
had this extraordinary gift that she really wasn't aware of. And she just, it's not that so much Darlene glowed, but her voice glowed.
Yeah.
And that when she sang, there was just something moving about it.
Yes.
And so she and I, well, when I started to write songs, Darlene and I would get together and we would then present it to the team, and she would sing it, and then she'd organise the backing vocals, and we that's how it began. And I'd
Hmm.
sing tenor harmonies, and so she had such a part. And when I left what became Hillsong, she just stepped into my shoes and basically caught the wave that happened. And to God's glory, she has made an extraordinary impact. And I remember her song "Shout to the Lord" being written,
Yeah.
and we were just sitting around a piano, and she said, "I've just written a song," and it took her 20 minutes to sing it to us because she was so embarrassed about it. Uh, and that was the innocence of the moment. We weren't
Yeah.
doing a songwriting collective in Nashville
Mm-hmm.
somewhere, trying to write a hit song. We were just trying to express what we felt about God, and how could we convey that to a congregation, just a
Mm-hmm.
congregation. All the album and the industry and everything came after that. It was
Mm-hmm.
in the end,
Mm-hmm.
it was just musicians and a congregation.
So great. Okay, Chad, I'm gonna make room
Deal.
for you there.
Awesome. Well, that's a perfect segue.
Yeah.
Geoff, through us doing the docu series, I've become good friends with Russell Fragar. I'd just love to hear,
Mm.
your perspective of when you first met him and what
Yes.
that was like.
Yeah.
Okay, well, Russell was back in the days where you had musical Christian artists or Christian music artists who would travel around and be guests in churches, and the worship movement in Australia. I don't know whether it was worldwide, sort of, certainly in Australia, overtook the Christian artist music ministry, and it became a worship ministry. So the first time I met Russell, I shared a concert with him, and then he and his wife joined the church. Would have been 85, 86, and of course we always needed musicians. And Russell was just, an absolute gun musician, highly
Hmm.
experienced. He had his own studio, but at the time I just needed a keyboard player and a bass player. And so Russell just sat in on the keys and or played bass. And then the demand that overtook us as suddenly these songs jump in cars and off they go. That
Yeah.
we're having to write music, and then we did two studio albums, Spirit and Truth and Show Your Glory, which probably people are totally unaware of.
Yeah.
And then the first five Hillsong albums, live albums, which culminated in the Shout to the Lord album. I left a week before that. And there's a story in that. And Russell became the church music director. He started to write. He started to notate the music, and we were able to put out demo tracks and music books and an album a year. And Rusty and I, it was like the Three Musketeers, really.
Yes.
There
Yes.
was Russell, Darlene, and Geoff, and it was just a synergy. And I have to stress, we weren't trying to do something.
Yeah.
We were just trying to keep up. We were just trying to keep up. We just, I don't know how to describe it. It was just overwhelming,
Yeah.
but we were too busy to realize what was
Yeah.
happening.
Yeah. Geoff, do you want to know I would say a common thread through now 21 interviews that we have done with the 90s Worship Podcast is we're finding over and over people are having that kind of response as they look back. You get the Ron Canoli, the Don Moen, the Paul Baloche, all of these people who stumbled on stage and weren't looking for anything. And out of the
Mm.
innocence of that, this wave just kind of swept through. And it's what makes people like yourself so engaging and so fascinating to listen to, because I love to hear the story of someone who wasn't out looking for, fame and glory and riches and all that, whatever it was, that they were truly focused on the thing at hand. And it just makes so much more compelling of a story to hear about that. And even as we're telling you about how we are so deeply impacted by your songs, and you're like, I never even realized that. It's just perfect.
It's
So
hilarious in a
yeah,
godly way.
yeah. I was just
But
thinking
I'm
as you were
still
talking
writing.
about Russell Fragar, I don't know if you remember a book you guys put out, someone put out, called The Art of the Chart. Do you remember that little it was a book. I think Russell wrote it, and it was probably an
I,
impact on the early, or were you a part of that as well? It just talked about how
no,
to
no,
write good charts, how to read, how to
right.
like set them up, lay them out, all the technical things in behind the music that was going on in the Hillsong world. And ultimately, I mean, that might have been one of the first times I associated the word chart with sheet music. We don't call it cheap
Oh, wow.
music, we call it the charts, right? So
Oh, wow.
hence
Yeah.
praise charts. That's where it all
Oh,
came
of
from.
course.
So isn't that fascinating?
Well, it is. See, in 1995, when Integrity contacted us to do an album, I was in the throes of knowing that I had to move on. It was a godly thing. There was just no
Yeah.
politics, no disagreement. It was just I knew that where I was going and the lyrics, the prayers that I was trying to put into my music was diverging,
Right.
and so I was to lead album, but I realized that I it would be wrong of me to be knowing that I had to go and yet be part of the album. And
Mm-hmm.
so that was a huge wave that broke all over the world, and I went into a different denominational expression,
Mm-hmm.
more in evangelical Baptist, what we call Church of England, which is Episcopalian.
Yep.
And so what happened after then was the tide going and the breaking of the wave. And so a lot of what happened after then, uh, I'm not overly aware of because there were so many other things happening in my life.
Right.
But it's
Right.
wonderful to hear. Yeah, I
Yeah.
look at because when that wave broke, it was sort of like
Yeah.
I thought it was extraordinary while I was there, but then
Yes.
watching what happened in Russell's ministry and then Darlene's ministry and then Reuben Morgan and it just exploded.
Yes. But Geoff,
Yeah.
you were there in the early, like it it flowed out of something that you established, and I mean I'm kind of glad that you didn't know about it
Yes,
because I just think this is almost the hope of all of us, that we might do something in our lives and maybe we'll die and never realize the impact of something we might do through our kids or through someone that we reached out to and they became the great one, the known one, the famous one or whatever. But we're all just responsible for living within and using the resources that we have. And it's just fun in this circumstance to be able to come back and tell the guy who was a part
Yeah.
of the very early shaping that a giant river flowed out of your hands, and we're so grateful. So
Yeah.
well, I'm grateful
Absolutely.
too.
yeah.
Yeah. I wanted to ask Geoff another question, Ryan.
Yes.
Yeah, I wanted to get your recollection, Geoff, about the song "Jesus Lover of My Soul," because that was, obviously one of the big Hillsong songs from the '90s. And to my understanding, I'd love to hear kind of more of the details, but there was like maybe a group of the youth had written the song and had brought it to y'all. Is that correct?
Yes, look, yes, look, that was a funny story. That one, I think it was. I don't know how many people wrote it because it just seemed to grow. Suddenly,
Right.
there were more and more people that had something to do with that song, and but it just came out of the youth group because the we had a youth group that were wild and bouncy and young, and they would have their Saturday night meetings, and then we would have our Sunday meetings, which were a little more conservative. And so there was always this sort of energy between the two of us, and obviously so many of the youth band were in the Hillsong band at the time, but of course the youth band became Hillsong United, is it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Or Unlimited, whatever
Or young and free.
that went around the world. Hmm?
Yeah.
All three, yeah,
Yes.
yes, louder and noisier, and and so they came to this with this song, "Jesus, Lover of My Soul," obviously it was I don't know, it was an inspired song that really had moved the youth, and that immediately went into the church playlist, and like all of the songs that were written at the time, the congregation. Um, I was going to say the congregation grabbed hold of it. I'd rather say that the work of the Holy Spirit through the song grabbed hold of the congregation. That's a better way
Right.
of putting it.
Yeah.
Uh, but it was so. But there, yes, there were. It was just hilarious because they'd all come into my office and they'd have this sort of this discussion about who wrote what. But I am sure that from the birth of that song back in those days, because they're all married in their 40s, probably their 50s now,
Yes.
these
Yeah.
young, wild teenagers.
Yeah.
But again, it was just part of the time. It was hilarious. Do you
Yeah.
know the song, Jesus, What a Beautiful Name?
Yes.
Jesus, what a beautiful
Yes,
name.
I
That was
totally
written
do.
by 50, that was written by a 15-year-old. A 15-year-old
Wow.
girl, and we didn't even know, I didn't even know she was musical. And one of the singers, a girl called Lisa Brown, said, "Geoff, come and listen to this song." And I think we just recorded the last song that I was part of, the last album I was part of. And they said, oh, Tanya's just written a song.
Yeah.
And I sat down and heard this song come out of this 15-year-old. And of course, that song's gone around the world.
Yeah.
And again, she wasn't trying to be famous. And this is, I suppose, this is the theme of this interview. She just had something to say about Jesus that came out, burst forth in this most magnificent melody. And there you go. It's gone. Well,
I'm actually just, if you don't mind, I'm just going to open up PraiseCharts here. I'm looking at the actual album. I mean, there's so many songs. I've got, first of all, I just wanted to show this. We've just loaded, Geoff, it feels like hundreds of songs. I'm just going to scroll through. But for those of you listening in to have a sense.
You've only got hundreds there.
Yes, I know.
There's at least 25,000, mate.
Something like that. But look at all this. I mean, the list goes on, and this is just this is like the history of Geoff Bullock. In fact, pictures of what you used to look like without in every shape of hair.
That's what I used to look like. Yes.
I know.
Yeah, when I had,
look at that.
Goodness me. Oh gosh, he was
so many songs, so many songs. Now the songs, because a lot of this actually precedes PraiseCharts, so we've been able to pick up this music from other distributors who have had your music over the years. But anyways, it all seems to have stemmed from now what we're hearing. The story is, without going into the specifics of that story, but you had moved on a week before this album came out, which is perhaps like a whole nother story to hear. But these songs obviously were taking shape leading up. You didn't write these songs the week before the album happened, right? So, this feels like it was a grand shifter for modern worship in the 90s. This particular album was like an earthquake, and these songs, Shout to the Lord, certainly being massive, The Power of Your Love right under it, which is written with Jesus, Lover of My Soul. This Kingdom, we haven't talked about that too much. Is that your song? I'm trying to remember.
Yeah,
that's huge song. Yes. I mean, are all these your songs? Jesus, Jesus, I Will Never Be.
Yes.
Did you have a part in all of these songs?
Which one's that one you've got there?
Let the Peace of God Reign.
No. So now there were two Shout to the Lord albums. There was the one that was released in '95, and then they did another one a little later.
Yes.
So the songs on the original one was basically where the music team arrived under Darlene, Russell, and myself, and so that's where when I left. That's where I left it, and then they continued on with Reuben Morgan, and then of course. Yes, it exploded. Yeah, and I went off and I continued to write songs. I'm probably writing my best songs now, but I think everybody says that. But,
yes,
but yes, so that's sort of where we got it. And then that was I like to think that was the wave that Darlene got on the board. She paddled, caught the wave, and I decided to wait for another one.
Yep. And so like the story of our lives is just our lives meander through, and then it seems like the Lord determines that he will use what he wants to use and come and pour in on different seasons, and just like seems to be the theme of your story is it's like people, you can't make this stuff happen. It happens. It happens to people who are the least suspecting. It's like the Davids, the Moseses, the Joshuas, of the Bible. It's like none of these people were out searching for worldwide fame. In fact, they were resisting it. They're like Moses was like, "Don't pick me. I'm not a speaker."
No.
Right?
No.
So
no,
I love that.
It's an extraordinary thing. I love, I'm just thinking of the book of Philemon or Titus or Jude. And they're just letters to these guys. And Paul sends them a letter. And and they go up to heaven, and they get, they meet Jesus and said, "Oh, by the way, do you remember that letter that Paul wrote you?" And they go, yeah, that was really quite nice. It changed my life. You said, well, it's in the Bible. And believe it or not, every word he wrote to you, I've made it my word. And they go, wow, no way.
Yeah.
And that's the beautiful thing about it. I just love the thought that Jesus says, when you denied me 3 times, and Peter goes, don't bring that up. He said, oh, you wouldn't believe that. That's in the Bible. Billions of people have read that story. It's just the beauty of how God uses these moments. And I mean, for Paul, or Saul, who became Paul, and Peter and David on a roof, shouldn't be looking down. All these, Moses say, don't put that. Did you put that in the book? And God uses those moments. Yeah. And you're not even aware of it. And yet he signs his name all over it and brings grace to people. Insane.
Well, Geoff, I have so enjoyed this conversation. I had no idea quite what to expect, but you're a very charming person to talk to. You're a little bit funny, a little bit quirky, but I mean that's what I love about you. You seem to be so down to earth and real, and it's a privilege to have honored you with some story and to share with you the impact certainly that you've had on PraiseCharts. And now, Chad, I'm sure you could say the same with the 90s Worship Podcast. Geoff is certainly a part of a big piece of that story. Hey, Chad.
Well, gentlemen, I am absolutely honored, and let me thank you for your organization's PraiseCharts that I didn't know about till I had a man, Travis Gandy, who was writing charts for me in the States, and he suggested, he said, well, so many of your songs can't be found. And he's the one that wrote the charts, or scanned the charts that existed and loaded them all up onto your website. And for me now I've now got links on my website to your site. Every
Fantastic.
song is linked through to your site.
Yeah.
The ministry you have done my songs in the last 4 months is unprecedented in my life, and I am just so grateful.
Well, and now you're doing the same thing to me I did to you.
And there'll be more. We'll keep uploading. We'll keep going.
Well, clearly you're still writing, so
great. Still writing. Yes, still being Geoff.
Yeah, still being Geoff. All right, Geoff. Well, thank you very much. I think a lot of people are going to enjoy the stories from this conversation, and I hope that you're encouraged, those of you who are listening on, especially, just who knows the massive impact that the Lord might be making through your life if you're listening in, and you may not know in the real time of the scope of this day or this week or this little church that you're at, that you're like, surely the Lord can't be using me in a big way, and you never know the rivers that may flow out from your life. So I hope you will feel encouraged and stay true, stay faithful, keep pressing on, and keep singing the songs. And you know what? I wouldn't pass by bringing out one of these oldies but goodies. Shout to the Lord, the power of your love, Jesus, lover of my soul, or even go back deeper than that. These songs still sing. They still hit the pocket, and so great. So this is Ryan Dahl, Geoff Bullock, and Chad Gentry from the 90s Worship Podcast signing off. What a great episode. Thank you, Geoff. Talk to you later. Okay, bye.